Hello, and thank you for visiting this tutorial. This tutorial is made specifically for someone who purchased one of my devices, or actually a couple of devices. One was the Symbolic Hieronymus Machine, and the other was the Intentionator. And the purchase is made to repel pest in her neighborhood or where she lives, Japanese beetles to be specific. I was interested in not only creating this tutorial, but actually helping with repelling those Japanese beetles that are a problem in that part of the country. Recently, I had a researcher from the Netherlands who used the Symbolic Hieronymus Machine to repel some kind of caterpillar. I forget the name of the caterpillar. But yeah, it was a problem in the Netherlands. There was these caterpillars that would stick on the trees, and he experimented with it. And he said he used this device along with another radionic device. He said the device I have alone, he had to tweak it using this other device, and together it worked. I think it's more about intention than anything. But I'm going to help first demonstrate my process. This is what this is about, the process that I do or go through in doing this type of experiment. I've only had one other experiment dealing with repelling pests, and that was someone asked me to help them with a rodent problem. And what I did was I used, I'm pretty sure I used a symbolic radionic device. What I did was I printed a picture or image of a cat, and I used the cat as my remedy. So on the target, I had an image of my sister's home. I put here, and over here, I wrote out, the treatment or my intention along with the picture of the cat. And it was successful. And I checked back and forth with her for up to a year and a half, and it was still no problem with the rodents. So that was a successful experiment. All right, so what do we do? Before you sit down to work on the device, you want to spend some time in prayer or meditation. To really get your mindset in that vibration of healing or using this kind of energy or directing this kind of energy. And once you feel comfortable enough that you've meditated or prayed enough to sit for the working, then what you do is you take the image or the sample you're using for you to target. In this case, I'm using, actually, let me back up for a moment. What my process was when I was first made aware of the intent of the device for this person in Nebraska, I meditated on it. I thought about it, and my first thought was to find out what was the natural enemy, if you will, natural predator for the Japanese beetle. And then from there, I would, go through a process there. But after doing some research, I found there is no natural enemy or predator for the Japanese beetle other than when it's still, I want to say larva before it even becomes a beetle. I had to research the life cycle of a Japanese beetle. And if this pass, you want to do the same thing, you want to, research it so you can get an idea of what you're working with. So I could see the life cycle of the beetle. And I know they come in bloom sometime in June as it gets warmer. And the only natural enemy of the Japanese beetle, while it's a larva before it becomes a beetle, is a bacteria, I think it is, called, this is an image of it. You can't really make it, but it's, I'll try my best to pronounce it. Pineobaculus papillae. So, the word is not the thing, it's the spirit of it all, but that's what it is. So that's the image. I also have the image of the home, the aerial shot of the neighborhood, and so that'd be my target. Here's a blow-up picture of that bacteria that I can't pronounce, and then I wrote out my specific intention. So, okay, so what else I want to say about the process? So these images, why do I have these images to begin with? Everything in the material world, in this dimension, has a spirit back to it. Everything without exception has a spirit back to it. It's like the spirit of it is projecting the materialization in this dimension, but it can't exist unless there's something behind it. So when you have an image of something, or if you're talking about a person, a piece of hair, a fingernail, or saliva, blood, anything that's connected to that person, you'll have a representation of vibrational DNA, if you will, of that person that you can tune into. If it's a place or thing, an image, actually a visual image of it would work, but for this exercise and for most people, having a physical image of it better focus your awareness to what you're working on. And this image of this neighborhood that historically had a Japanese beetle problem has a frequency to it. So that's what I'm working with when I use these images. So I would first have to get the frequency. Now, because I'm filming this and I have lights on and I'm talking, I can't get the vibration I want without going silent for a long time, and that's not the purpose here. I give instructions with these devices, but what I'm doing is placing the target on the witness plate. I'm using both photos, and then I would rub my fingers, make sure your hands are dry and clean. And then I would rub my fingers, starting at 0, use the dial, rotate the dial, and rub my fingers until I feel it stick. I left out something. My bad. I have a crystal. This is a crystal that I had for years, wrapped in copper. I sent a smaller crystal with each one of these devices. I want to put the crystal on the schematic where you see the battery. When I ship these taped, but if it comes apart for some reason, you know where it goes, which is right there. All right, so then we put a target back on the witness plate, and we go through the stick pad. I learned that you can use anything for a stick pad if you're trying to get the frequency of something. The idea is as you're thinking about that person or that thing, that target, and you're stroking, in this case, a stick pad, but it could be a table, anything dry. When you are in tune, you should feel it stick. But yeah, that's just something interesting. That's just something with our nature that happens, and until you experience it, you won't know. Until you practice it, you won't know. So back to our tutorial. We have our photos on the witness plate, our target on the witness plate. We have our charger, or the battery, using the crystal. And then we would go through the dial, starting at 0 and turning it clockwise until you feel a stick. And when you feel a stick, you stop and you make note of the frequency. Now, I didn't do an actual reading on this one here because, again, I do this in a very solemn space, and this is not the place for that for me. The other thing is, if you're not comfortable using the dial or the stick pad, I encourage you to try it. It's you know, once you get the hang of it, it's fun or interesting anyway. But if you felt uncomfortable using the stick pad, or you didn't trust it, use a pendulum. And what you would do is over the scratch pad, you would turn the dial. Actually, replace well, let me stop for a moment here. This is the remedy of this is the natural enemy of the Japanese beetle. I struggle with using this because I wasn't certain if this would cause harm, if it's going to kill the larva. For some people, that's not a big deal. For me, I live an ideal of harmlessness as a vegan, and in all areas of my life, I practice harmlessness wherever I can. So rather than to exterminate, I seek to repel. So my treatment would be around that. However, you may feel differently, and that's okay, because my learning has put me in a place where I am. So once I know something, and at contrary to what I know, there's a karma that's associated with that I have to contend with. However, someone else who is not of that same awareness will not experience that same karma. So use your own discernment as to what you use as a remedy or as a frequency to repel or counteract whatever you're working on. For example, the men who originally created not necessarily this device, but another device that I use for exterminating pests in farmland. What they did was they used the image, much like I have here, and they had a representation of a pesticide that would kill the pest. So I don't know if they use a drop of the pesticide on a napkin or what have you, but they used a sample, and they used that to broadcast from that particular device, and it worked. It was at the Penn State University, I think it was. They did the experiment, a number of places, but they have it documented there, and it was successful with not necessarily a Japanese beetle, but something similar to. So I wanted to share that with you because I wouldn't feel comfortable broadcasting the frequency of a pesticide in anyone's neighborhood. So that's why I'm having this conversation in this tutorial. So as you look at ways to repel pests, look at ways to do it harmlessly. Now, getting back to my process, when I was contemplating and meditating and thinking about this tutorial and helping this person with that Japanese beetle problem, I have guides that I blend with in meditation, and guides for a number of things, from healing to philosophy to science and so forth. And when I do a meditation, I ask for help. I imagine these guides around me. On this particular day when I was beginning the process of thinking about helping this person, I thought about my guides and who would best help me with this. And I have pictures, like small pictures of the guides I use that are living or have photos, excuse me, that are not living, but have photos. Some of the guides, they're just artist representations of, or, drawings of it, what have you, when they predate photography. But yeah, so I have a folder that I have some photos in that I use from time to time. And I went to get this folder that I hadn't used for a while, and an image dropped out, and the image was of George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was a guide I blended with from time to time for something I was working with in the past, and this was perfect because, if you do the research on George Washington Carver, you'll find that he was an amazing scientist. He was an amazing spiritualist, if you will, because he was able to commune with nature, and he did some amazing things. And he actually helped farmers get rid of something called a boll weevil. They had a boll weevil infestation that he helped with, about treating the soils in some kind of way. So I'm telling you this because George Washington Carver, as a guide that I would reach out to, is now obviously in the spirit land. When he was physical in the material world, he used his material abilities along with spiritual inspiration to do the things that he did. And you'll see that when you research him. But in the spirit land, he is the best person to help me deal with this problem on a spiritual level. So if there's a way to repel these Japanese beetles before they manifest, I think then I can stay consistent with my ideal of harmlessness. So that went into my process. I printed out a number of images of George Washington Carver, different stages of his life, and I put an image of myself in the center. And I did that to create a physical representation of my spiritual ideal of being surrounded by this awesome man, this gentle genius, and to create a radionic energy around this image, the thought, and the intent of repelling these Japanese beetles. So, find a frequency, follow the directions that I sent or I ship with the devices to determine how long to broadcast, and then set it, meditate on it, and from time to time come back to meditate and visualize what you want to see happen, So for this person I'm creating this tutorial for, when you do this part of your working using this particular device, imagine your field, your garden, free of these Japanese beetles, free of the harmful presence of these Japanese beetles. It could very well, be some, maybe, but not in any way that's harmful to your land and your property, and the same for the rest of the state. As I'm saying this, I have my eyes closed and I'm feeling the energy as I'm trying to blend with that intent. So if I drift off or my pattern changes, understand that's what's occurring. So I think I covered everything for this tutorial. Find a frequency either with the scratch stick pad, with the pendulum, or with the pendulum. You have your target on the witness plate. After you get your frequency, you put your intent on this plate. Oh, that's where I left off at. So I wrote down my intent, and I'll read part of it. I'll leave out the part that's unique, specific to the person I'm helping. I put down today's date, and I use Indian ink. I learned in my studies that using Indian ink is helpful in this type of work, because Indian ink has a electromagnetic property to it. It's conducive. It conducts electricity, is what I want to say. Yeah, Indian ink conducts electricity, and because of the work we're doing, I found and read that helps. So that's what I do. If you don't have Indian ink, that's fine. If you have it, use it. With conscious intention, this is what the card reads, with conscious intention and harm to no one, I ask the spirit of the Japanese beetle to refrain from harmful infestation in Nebraska in general and specifically, and I have the person's name and her address, and then I have radionic symbols, or ciphers, if you will, of the Om. So I think I covered that portion. If I missed something, I'll add it, or if I didn't make something clear, shoot me a question, I'll respond. And then the next tutorial will use my process for the Intentionator, which is not much different. Thank you.